This is CBC Vancouver News.
BC's port strike drags on.
For every day the port operations are down, it takes us about a week to recover afterwards.
The multi-billion-dollar holdup and why a growing number of businesses are calling for the federal government to intervene. Plus, priced out.
What can I do? What do I actually have to live in my car? And I can't do that with my son.
A single dad's desperate plea to find affordable housing in Vancouver. And 20 years after making history,
I burst out crying. I couldn't talk, and my heart was bursting.
BC's first same-sex couple to legally marry reflect on the historic moment. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Janella Hamilton. Dan is away tonight. Cargo at BC's ports remain at a standstill. Port workers in the province have been on strike since last Saturday. Now, as Belle Puri explains, there are growing calls for the federal government to step in and use legislation to send workers back on the job.
BC ports are Canada's gateway to Asia. Right now, nothing is moving.
That's a big pile of exports that are coming in by rail that aren't able to get out into containers and be returned to the port. And then over here on my right, we've got some import goods that are left from the shipments that have just finished coming in.
Companies that manage the movement of goods are stressed.
Well, our rule of thumb for port disruptions in Vancouver is typically that for every day the port operations are down, it takes us about a week to recover afterwards.
7,400 longshore workers at 30 ports went on strike on Canada Day. It's feared a long dispute could have a devastating impact on the country's supply chain.
The Port of Vancouver is what I call Canada's 800-pound gorilla in terms of ports. It handles about 43% of the total port volume in Canada.
The BC Maritime Employers Association says already the strike has disrupted $4.6 billion worth of cargo. The workers want higher wages as well as provisions against contracting out and job automation. But since Monday, talks have stalled. Business groups want the federal government to intervene with back-to-work legislation.
We believe fundamentally that the best deals are always found at the bargaining table, and we will keep putting a lot of pressure on all parties to find that solution.
Ottawa does have other options.
They could legislate a cooling off period. They could mandate a period of mediation, voluntary mediation.
We bring in things by less than container load, so we're sharing our containers with a number of other manufacturers.
Meanwhile, the strike's effects continue to escalate.
Once we get past that 30-day cycle of an ocean container from Asia to North America, that's when we start getting into the scary cost mode for small and mid-sized manufacturers. 30 days, wheels come off the wagon.
For these businesses, the longer the strike goes on, the more serious the impact. Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
The ongoing job action is drawing attention to just how much Canada depends on the port for its economic activity and how big the consequences of a prolonged shutdown can be. Michelle Gassou breaks down the cost to our economy and to you.
If you live in Vancouver, you've probably seen the port from afar, but you likely don't give it too much thought. For the most part, it runs in the background of daily life here, connecting Canada with the rest of the world. But this week, a strike by workers has brought activity at ports across BC to a standstill. All of a sudden, all eyes are on port operations and just how much we rely on them. Whether you buy something online or in a store, chances are it passed through here at some point. For some perspective, the Port of Vancouver is about the same size as the next 5 largest Canadian ports combined, with 29 major terminals that can handle cargo from raw wood to tennis shoes and massive cruise ships. This specific port behind me connects Canada to 170 economies around the world and handles 1/3 of Canada's trade in goods outside North America. All of that adds up to around $305 billion in goods, over 115,000 jobs, and $11.9 billion in GDP across Canada. So what happens when this all comes to a standstill, and how can that happen in the first place? The situation here is changing day to day, even hour by hour, but around 7,400 port workers across BC are on strike. These are crucial workers that load and unload cargo ships and keep the port moving. These were the workers that kept supply chains going during the pandemic, making sure we all had the supplies we needed while most of us were working from home. Their main concerns right now are around protecting against automation, contracting out, and making sure that wages go up as the cost of living goes up and up. Without them working, most of that economic activity we talked about has come to a halt. So what is actually happening here right now? Basically, there is a bottleneck of cargo clogging up the port. Nothing is being moved on the ships or being shipped off to other countries. Industry players are warning that the delays could translate to higher prices for consumers because shipping companies now have to pay for the time their goods are sitting on containers or on the ships. Perishable items are going bad, and farmers across Canada are worried about getting their product out. There are some exceptions. The bulk movement of grain is still going through because of specific legislation under the Canadian Labour Code. And this isn't just a now problem. The Canadian National Railway Company has even gone so far as saying because the port and railways are so connected, a work stoppage can create disruptions that take weeks or even months to correct.
Everybody's going to be working at clappers to try to catch up. It'll take quite a while to catch up. I'm not sure how long, but just think of the problems that are going to be faced by the railroads. They've got bulk commodities that need to be moved, so there's going to be significant congestion type costs subsequent to this and any strike. And the longer it goes on, the worse that's going to be.
All of this to say, this shutdown could impact the price you are paying for things. And this impact is huge to Canada. An estimated $5.5 billion for every week. Yes, that is a B for billion. So a lot of people have a big interest in getting things here moving again. And there have been calls for the federal government to step in and order workers back to work. So far, the feds say they won't be intervening.
I think the government, in this case, takes the long view. They've tried interventions and it just made things worse the next time around.
So for now, the scene here will remain much quieter than usual, with the cries from industry across the country likely to only get louder.
A man who pleaded guilty to murdering one person and trying to kill 6 others in a 2021 stabbing spree apologized to victims today at a sentencing hearing. 30-year-old Yannick Bandego did not give a motive for the attack, but in a statement he told the court about his history with drug use that he says played a role in his behavior. Bandego's guilty plea means the case will be straight to sentencing.
Not having 7 weeks of trial in which all of this is constantly in the media and constantly dredged up, I think is of real value to the emotional well-being and emotional healing of the various victims and their families.
Sentencing is scheduled to take place on August 31st. A single father in Vancouver is making a desperate public plea to find housing for him and his son. As Eva Yuguen-Senge reports, he says even with an above-average salary, he still feels priced out of the city.
There's another one right over there. This is just one block.
Carl Eaton is desperately searching for a place to live for him and his son Tristan. The single father makes about $75,000 a year working for TELUS. He says he can't find a 2-bedroom apartment in Vancouver for less than half his salary.
How do I pay that? How do I insure my car? How do I buy food? How do I raise my child? How do I buy clothes?
Eaton and his son have been living in basement suites for the past 2 years. They've had to move again and again when owners sold the property or moved their relatives into the suite. Now they've run out of options.
What can I do? What do I actually have to live in my car? And I can't do that with my son.
And parents like Eaton aren't the only ones feeling anxious about housing.
So I think my generation would definitely feels that all the time everywhere they go.
Eaton was told he makes too much money to qualify for BC housing. He even reached out to Premier David Eby's office for help. The Premier says more housing is on the way.
A lot of our new housing strategy focuses on middle-income people, using public land to build that housing that's actually attainable for people to rent or to purchase.
And some advocates agree that more units need to be built.
There aren't enough places to go around and someone has to get pushed out. So next year you'll probably be doing a story about someone making $85,000 in the same situation.
But Eaton is skeptical that more housing means more affordable housing.
Normal average people like me are really getting pushed into hard areas. You wonder why there is more homelessness. You see how many people living in RVs right now, out of their vans, camper vans and stuff.
Eaton says his son will have to work this summer to help pay for rent, but he worries even that won't be enough. Eva Ugwen-Senge, CBC News, Vancouver.
A BC Supreme Court judge sided with Airbnb earlier this week, allowing the addresses of people who rent out homes on the website to remain private. Last year, a housing advocate and activist made a Freedom of Information request for the addresses of Airbnb hosts, arguing renters have the right to know if they were being evicted to make way for an Airbnb. The company opposed that request, and a BC judge has now agreed with the company, noting the address of a resident is considered personal information, even if it is a business. There's a clash happening between residents and the Vancouver Park Board over ponds. Many are sitting dry, but it's by design. As Scherer, take a look.
If you don't fill them up, this is what you end up with.
No ducks, no geese, no other signs of a healthy pond. Michael Sear gets frustrated looking at the mud piles at Vancouver's Vanier Park.
This is a lovely pond when it's full of water. You can see the pond lilies here. These bulrushes should be full of redwings.
The ecology enthusiast blames a Vancouver Park Board bylaw introduced 3 years ago. The rules shut off the taps to ponds and fountains that don't recirculate water, saying it's necessary for conservation.
It seems that it would be impossible and frankly irresponsible to maintain these ponds as if it was back 50 years ago when there was a lot of rain in the city.
Sear isn't the only resident concerned about the dried out ponds. Another resident started a petition late last month about this pond in Memorial South Park in South Vancouver. More than 900 people have signed so far.
All across the city, the water features have been allowed to fall into disrepair. Again, they're filled with garbage and invasive weeds.
The petitioners are also concerned about what this would mean for wildlife that depend on the ponds.
It used to be full of ducks. We're on a migratory flyway. It was always full of ducks and songbirds stopping to rest and refuel. There was a family of raccoons living under the wharf there. They've left.
The park board, however, says that it wants to conserve water to mitigate against drought and climate change. Most of Vancouver's water comes from the North Shore's Capilano Reservoir, where the city gets its drinking water.
It's an incredible waste of resources. People have to acknowledge that climate change is hitting and things are going to have to change.
Sear says he recognizes the need for water conservation, but he's also concerned about green spaces for wildlife and how it contributes to our mental well-being.
If they sat down and tried to work out the value of a pond, the value of the wildlife, they would come up with a sum that would move them this direction.
The park board has made exceptions in the past. 6 fountains were reactivated. In an email to CBC, a park board spokesperson says these ponds could be considered later this year. But for now, the ponds will remain as they are. Shaurya Chetri, CBC News, Vancouver.
An evacuation order issued for part of the township of Spalmsheen in the Okanagan due to a wildfire has been rescinded. But both the east and west side of Round Lake Road remain under an evacuation alert. The township also downgraded to a Level 1 emergency operations center. Entrances to trails nearby have been closed and crews will remain on site overnight. Meanwhile, firefighters are also responding to a wildfire about 18 kilometers north of Abbotsford. The Davis Lake wildfire is approximately 50 hectares in size and is suspected to be human-caused. Air quality in northern BC remains poor, with Fort St. John at a level 4 on the Air Quality Health Index, meaning moderate risk. Forecasts show northeast BC could reach level 5 by tomorrow. The concentration of particles in the air has exceeded the provincial acceptable limit for Fort St. John, Hudson's Hope, Chetwynd, and Prince George. Health risks are higher for seniors, children, and those with respiratory illnesses. Due to that wildfire smoke, Metro Vancouver issued an air quality advisory yesterday, but because of cooler temperatures and favorable winds, the advisory has since been cancelled. As hot, dry weather continues to hit BC, Environment and Climate Change Canada has issued heat warnings for the interior. The Thompson, Caribou, Shuswap, and Okanagan areas are included in the warning. With forecasts for the weekend reaching 35 degrees Celsius, experts say the risk of heat-related illnesses is high. Health officials are encouraging people in those regions to drink plenty of water, never leave pets inside parked cars, and check on vulnerable people. A bit of a damper on a summer camping tradition. As of today, campfires are banned across most of the province. New bans came into effect at noon today in the Coastal Fire Centre and Kamloops Fire Centre. All of BC except Haida Gwaii, coastal parts of the northwest and the southeast have complete fire bans. However, officials say they are still expecting campgrounds to be packed to capacity.
We find that the fire bans don't really impact our attendance. You know, people are pretty accustomed to fire bans coming on. And I think people are pretty cognizant of the fire risk out there, the impact that it can have to public safety and to resources. So they seem pretty respectful of the bans, and it doesn't really seem to deter use.
Those caught violating the campfire ban could receive fines up to $100,000 or even face a prison sentence of up to a year. The first same-sex couple to legally marry in BC are celebrating their 20th wedding anniversary. We caught up with them to see how they're marking the occasion. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Fishing is a much-loved pastime for many people, but not all of them are angling for actual fish. There's a dedicated group that is casting lines with magnets into the water. Isaac Olson met up with one avid fisherman to find out what it's all about.
It's like doing the lottery. You throw, you don't know what you're gonna find. I found a mortar from World War II, cell phones that I got, a lot of money that I found around here because people are making wishes. Sometimes the wishes come back to my magnet, sorry. My name is Fred Hardy. I'm a French-Canadian from South Shore of Montreal. I do magnet fishing simply for fun. I have my own YouTube channel, is Joker's Magnet. What you do, you have your rope, you have your magnet. Sometimes it's a carabiner that's tied the magnet to your rope. You throw in the water and you pull. What you can find depends on where you're at. If you're near a railway, like we heard right now at Water Market, you will have some railroad stuff, some spikes, some plates, even some locks from old wagons. This is the first time I saw this. I think it's a railway plate, but that's the biggest one I ever seen. And sometimes it's a challenge. You can remove some big stuff from the water because if you go in the past, everyone was throwing everything in the water because they thought it would disappear. So you can remove old things like cars and even like boats if you want. But you need to be careful because they're heavy and maybe sometimes you're gonna lose your magnet to it. It happened to me. Last week I caught a gun. It's an old Swedish gun it began the marketing from 1942 to 1960. It's been cut, but it's a beautiful piece. I've called the police. They said to me, if you want it as a decoration, no problem, keep it. Most of it, I scrapped it. I go to a place that takes metal back for recycling. They give me money. It's not a lot of money, but for me, it's more about the challenge and cleaning the waters. We don't get everything out, but at least we're cleaning up the waterways, and that's the purpose of magnet fishing. Be patient. It's like the real fishing. You need to be patient. You need to do long throws, pull slowly. It's fun. You're outside, you have wind. You talk to people, you do what you want. If you don't like to go outside, sorry, magnet fishing is not for you.
It's been 20 years since same-sex marriage was legally recognized in British Columbia. Tom Graff and Anthony Porcino were the first same-sex couple to be legally married in Vancouver. Now they are reflecting on what it means to be husbands after more than 30 years of being together.
I'm Tom Graff, and I am married to this wonderful gentleman whom I call Hello Husband.
The husband here is Anthony, and it still feels incredible to be able to say hello, husband.
Hello, husband.
I still remember the struggles to be sort of recognized as equal, and it actually was a very physical feeling to me that I no longer had to fight to have my relationship recognized.
I burst out crying. I couldn't talk, and my heart was bursting.
For me, it was just very humbling and at the same time awesome.
We rushed over and get a license, and it said bride and groom. We had to fill out our names, so we asked how to spell spouse, and no one knew. Excited.
Elated.
And equal to everyone in our country.
For me, a couple of those words still ring very true. It really feels incredible to be able to actually say husband. Currently, we're in some ways, we're concerned about human rights rolling back a little bit, and it does make me concerned.
When you're listening to someone and they're talking about marrying whatever you are in the queer rainbow, as though it was there before, well before, we were all Canadians. They don't know that it's only 20 years. It feels like that's not a long time. It isn't a long time, but to us, it's huge.
Here we have a live shot of the Port of Vancouver. Russ LeCate will have our full forecast coming up next.
Okay, stand by. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is one of the most popular TV shows on the air in Canada's Arctic. Although the local satellite dish makes it just as easy to get slick American shows, this one is the clear ratings champ. It's called Takuginai, and it's not only Canadian, it's homegrown in the Arctic. It's the only native language children's program in the country. Takuginai is Inuktitut for look here. It's been on the air almost a year now. Each 15-minute episode is produced by this team in the cramped facilities of the children's unit of the Inuit Broadcasting Corporation. The show was set up as a vehicle for a training project, but Takuginai has become more important than a training exercise.
Children don't have the option here of buying materials that are in Inuktitut because there's a very limited source of material that are in Inuktitut.
For Inuit kids, Takuginai is a dose of traditional ways delivered by modern TV techniques. Each show is built around a traditional theme, whether it's clothing, hunting, or carving. But the big stars of Takuginai are the puppets. Each one is a uniquely northern character. There's Grandpa and Nala the seagull, Tulu the raven, Grandma, Anyuknik the little girl, and Johnny the lemming.
Hello.
The puppets and their animators were helped by a local puppeteer and a consultant from the kids show Fraggle Rock. In the show, the role of the elder in Inuit society is a main focus. It's the elders who are the ones with knowledge and wisdom.
We can't go into a library and look at the year 1820 and say, oh, this is how it was. It's not there, so. And it's not just for history, it's to pass down, it's, you know, animals, all parts of living. And when you're trying to sort of preserve a language and you don't have the materials to do so, it can be very frustrating. But here, we're using TV to maybe achieve the same purpose, and it's more immediate.
Blandina Makic and the others who work on Takuginai are currently planning a third series of shows. And a whole new crop of young Inuit kids will begin learning about their culture from their elders, their peers, and puppets like Johnny here. For Midday, I'm Kurt Petrovich in Iqaluit.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
The 15th annual Latincouver Festival continues to July 20th, and CBC Vancouver is proud to be the exclusive media partner. Enjoy a series of sensational Latin American experiences and the popular Carnaval del Sol Festival. And the Herb Original is a new CBC British Columbia podcast. Stream it today on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace, installing the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
Well, Russ, I know some parts of the province experience quite the thunderstorms. Is that something that's going to be reoccurring?
I think it'll be an encore performance, absolutely, but that is largely outside of the Lower Mainland and concentrated across the BC interior, the southern part of the province. Here locally, earlier today, we had the fresh breeze that came in right on cue. It helped to freshen up the air quality advisory for Metro Vancouver and the Valley. That was dropped earlier today, and we're looking ahead at a weekend that does include a chance to breathe a bit easier. But in the middle of the night, that marine air that's come in, it may actually trigger a few showers over parts of Vancouver Island. And before the sun comes up tomorrow, some of those showers drifting across the Lower Mainland. It's a really close call. Now, admittedly, I did not put rain showers in the Vancouver forecast tonight and tomorrow morning, but they're all around the perimeter, and you might get surprised by something in the middle of the night yet. Province-wide, what is going on? Well, there's much more active weather than what we'll have here in Metro Vancouver. High pressure over the north is suppressing much in the way of cloud development. It is heat, sunshine, and smoke for areas like Dease Lake, Fort Nelson, and Fort St. John. But as we trend south through parts of the province, we're going to see thunder showers redeveloping in the inland sections of the north and central coast again. The heat is on. 31 for Terrace tomorrow, 29 in Bella Coola, 31 in Prince George. A concentration of more thunderstorms around the South Thompson and the northern parts of the Fraser Canyon for tomorrow. It's a little concerning, so we're going to keep an eye on that developing situation for you. Looking as far as what's happening around the Lower Mainland, well, we have some interesting weather primarily around the mountains where the clouds will stack up at times. There might be some showers in Hope tracking into the Fraser Valley. The rest of the region, a beautiful day, plenty of sunshine tomorrow, no sizzle, temperatures settling into the low 20s. And how does that look for the rest of the long-range picture? Well, it's fairly agreeable. Your weekend includes some sun and 24 degrees on Sunday, a cooler phase early next week for a few days, lots of cloud cover, maybe some Monday night or Tuesday morning showers. It'll be a close call, but we're watching the radar. Janella?
Nice to see a little bit of variety when it comes to temperatures throughout the week compared to all the sun and heat that we've been experiencing. Thanks so much, Russ. A runaway white peacock is back home after more than 9 days on the lam.
Well, we did it. We caught him.
The rare bird escaped from a hobby farm in Quebec. The owner says the bird got away after one of his ponies lifted a latch in the barn. Yesterday, a neighbor spotted the white peacock in their backyard, and the bird's relieved owner was able to coax it off of the shed roof. Sparkles, the pony, won't be aiding and abetting any more escapes because more latches are going in. That is your late news for this Friday. Thank you so much for watching. For news at any time, visit our website, cbc.ca/bc. Have a great night.